Elisabeth, thank you for having your time to talk to us about everything, really. So welcome to Kurunzi News. So welcome on board.
Thank
let's
you.
begin with what matters the most. Congratulations, you braved against the grain, and you presented yourself as a candidate. Unfortunately, the system did not allow that, but you went to court, and here we are. Tell us about what the feeling is having gone to court and to be able to, get the verdict that you got, and you're now going to run as a presidential candidate in presidential elections.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It has been, look, we started working on this campaign 2 years ago, and I have been all along looking forward to the opportunity to contest. On 21st of June this year, we finally had the chance to go to court. We did everything necessary. We got all the signatures from, citizens across the country embracing or endorsing me as their candidate. And on the 21st of June, we were not allowed to contest, unfortunately. We were not given the go-ahead to get on the ballot. So I have since been in a court battle, essentially appealing for the opportunity to have my name on the ballot as a presidential candidate. It was saddening and disappointing all along to see that we had 11 candidates, and all of them were male. And I was the only woman, who actually there are 2 women in Zimbabwe that had submitted their application, but essentially the only woman now who has been granted the opportunity to be on the ballot here in Zimbabwe. So I am excited, I'm thankful, I'm very, very grateful that justice has been served, that I've been given this opportunity. But I'm also a little bit disappointed that I've lost so much time. I should have been campaigning from the beginning. I've lost almost a month in this campaign election. So a lot of work ahead of me, excited, doing a lot of planning and thinking about what comes next.
Well, I guess that's the nature of African politics, and we really are proud of you, and we want to congratulate you in terms of what you've done in terms of the fight, and we wish you the best. But let's take you a little back, and I mean, you are gonna be the only woman on the ballot, the first one in Zimbabwean politics. But let's get to know, who is Elisabeth?
Yeah.
What makes Elisabeth? Who is she? Where has she come from? Where was she born? What about her that people need to know about you?
Sure. So I do want to say there are other women that have been on the ballot contesting against presidential offices. So I wouldn't be the first woman to have contested in politics in Zimbabwe, but I'm the only woman, the first woman on the ballot this year, which is has been a major milestone, because this year Zimbabwe actually made it very difficult for women to actually contest. Every candidate at the presidential level had to come up with $20,000 to be able to even get their name, in the consideration, on this ballot. So it was very difficult. I think other women maybe would have also wanted to be there or to contest, but the democratic space has been closed by making it more difficult, almost impossible for most people to contest. And I believe in politics, everyone should be given the right to stand for their people if they choose to. So that was very, very unfair. I will also add that, you ask about who am I. My mother was the first woman in Africa to run for president. She stood in an election against Mugabe. So my mom was the first woman to break that ground. She doesn't get a lot of recognition for that. She passed away many years ago. And I think perhaps it was my destiny to pursue this path. I didn't look for it. I didn't intend to become a politician. But it might have been my destiny because my mom broke ground in that regard. There have been many brave women in Zimbabwe that have stood up and wanted to see a very different Zimbabwe. In terms of my background, I'm a scientist. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. I grew up in Zimbabwe, born in the capital city. My traditional rural home, my ancestral home, is the Great Zimbabwe Ruins, a place of royalty. So I'm born from Mashingo, which is the province where Great Zimbabwe is, and that is my cultural heritage. I was initially raised by parents who are very enterprising. These were business people, individuals who pursued various sectors in industry. My mom, when I was a young girl, had a factory that was creating ceramics, whether it was plates or cups or some of the first ceramics in our country. She then went on to become a businesswoman who supplied fruit and vegetables throughout the country. She owned hotels. Like, she was very enterprising as a Black woman in Zimbabwe, one of the first businesswomen after independence to create jobs and to actually forge her own way as a woman entrepreneur. I've pursued a similar path, although I'm a scientist and have worked for a number of years as a scientist. I have an invention to my name, having worked in the biotechnology field. But I also now am owner and operator of a safari tourism space in Hwange in Zimbabwe, a wildlife space. And I own my own businesses as well. So I'm a self-made woman. I have a husband who fully supports and backs me in all the work that I do. I am multifaceted. I'm also very keen and interested to support communities. And so I've got involved in educating our communities. I run a program that focuses on STEM education for secondary school students. I run an organization that's a Pan-African entrepreneurial network called Elisa Network. I also am CEO of a Pan-African organization called the African Federation. So I wear many hats. My commitment is to uplifting our continent and our country, Zimbabwe. No 2 days for me are the same. I'm constantly working on something different and important for our country, our people.
Well, I'll take you back a little bit to when your mother ran against Mugabe, because that's quite interesting to see, because I was going to ask you what motivates you to get into politics and why you decided to run for president. But I do realize that runs perhaps in the family. So when did your mother run against Mugabe, and what was her name, and what was the experience that your mother had, and may God rest her soul in peace? And how does that then motivate you as you go into this campaign?
Look, when my mom was in politics, I didn't really understand what she was doing or why she was doing it, and I was not involved. She formed her political party in the mid-80s, 1987, I believe it was. You'd have to check me on the year, but she was at the time very disappointed. She was someone who had worked very hard to help pave the way for democracy in our country. She was part of that liberation struggle leading up to 1980. And she was very disappointed when she realized that even post-independence, the ordinary citizen didn't have access to what they were supposed to have. They didn't have what we are fighting for today, a good life. We want Zimbabweans to have a good and normal life, that they should have basic human rights, basic access to water, electricity, good roads, education, hospitals. She wanted that for Zimbabwe. So she formed a political party. I knew very little about it. And, at a certain point, she contested in the elections. She's been in debates with other presidential candidates. One of them was Mugabe. So I didn't know much or follow much. And my mom passed away before I had a chance to speak much with her about it. I learned a lot about it in the history books after the fact. And she's not given much recognition for the role she played in Zimbabwean politics. I will say, though, that, in terms of my own path, I wasn't following politics because of my mother. I was fighting my own battle. Where I live is it's a wilderness tourism space, and I was fighting my first battle in politics to protect our conservation areas. I live very close to a national park where elephants roam and lions roam, and tourists travel there to come and see our wildlife. And the current government had proposed that mining should be allowed in a national park for coal mining, which would completely change the environment in which we were operating. And so my first entry into politics was actually, a battle to protect the national park, which thankfully the government did then listen to, and they reversed their position. But then I started receiving phone calls from people from across the country saying, people are coming into our area, they're trying to remove us from our ancestral sites, places that generation upon generation of Zimbabwean citizens have lived. And that's what started me in politics. I realized that Zimbabwe was no longer for Zimbabweans. It was now a country that was being exploited. And I wasn't seeing the equivalent, translation in terms of benefits to our own people. So that's what I saw and observed. And I called a group of people together. We had some conversations around a fire for 2 days in the wilderness. And after 2 days, we all realized that the only way we were going to fix our problems, and people kept saying to me, Elisabeth, it's not just about the elephants. Our whole country needs help. We don't have, the most basic things. And so ultimately, it came down to, we need a new government. That's the only way we can fix that. And I was elected the president of this new political party, which is called the United Zimbabwe Alliance, UZA. That's our party name.
Where I come from, UZA means sell. So, I mean, it means to sell, UZA.
Oh, UZA.
So
we have
I come from Kenya.
UZA.
So
Wow,
I come from Kenya. So you're doing something good. So
thank you.
But beyond that, you've spoken about a bit about the question that I wanted to ask you next in terms of what motivates you. But I do realize that beyond just being a politician, you have a passion to serve. But let me just ask you, so as a presidential candidate, what are you offering the Zimbabwean people? And the people of Zimbabwe have gone through turmoil for a long time. I mean, facing sanctions internationally, and I mean, all manner of things. The economy is struggling. The currency is, the worst that anybody can talk about. So what promise, what hope do you run your campaign on? And you're going to have another 1 month or so to do that. So what do you tell the Zimbabwean people that you're offering them? Because
sure,
there are people that have gone through turmoil for a long time.
Yeah. Look, I think your point about what motivates me is really also what we are offering. When I think about Zimbabwe, we are the one country in our continent that should have been an example to every other African country. We had a thriving,
You're right.
I mean, literally, we were the breadbasket, called the breadbasket of Africa. We have literally an agricultural sector that is latent right now that could be thriving. We have, as a country, mineral wealth. We have intellectual wealth. We have Zimbabwean citizens all over the world building other countries. So when I look at Zimbabwe, what really drives me, what has motivated me for many years, is the fact that we have a country that can be doing so much better and is not. And I believe that it's time for us as Zimbabwe to take control of this country and get every citizen involved in playing their role in building a new and better Zimbabwe. Well, at the end of the day, when you ask about what are we offering Zimbabwe, I think that one of the biggest problems in our country, what we've been doing wrong, we've been looking to a few individuals and saying they will fix Zimbabwe, they will be the answer to Zimbabwe. And that's wrong. Every Zimbabwean has a role to play. And so what motivates me, what drives me, and what our mandate is is to ensure that we, for the first time, will have a government that puts the citizens at the center of our mission. We always say that our ideology is citizens' engagement. We want the citizens to be engaged in building the new Zimbabwe. And so what I did as a new presidential candidate, or as a new political party, we spent time traveling, canvassing the whole country, meeting people, asking them, what kind of Zimbabwe do you want? What's wrong where you live? What is not happening that you want to see happen? And we built an entire manifesto around what the citizens want. Whereas every other political party has come with their own agenda, they've come saying this is what we will do, and they impose their ideas upon citizens. Politics is a game or a process to some of our politicians. It's how best to deceive or maneuver the citizens. And that is not what we should be doing. We are here to serve. We are here to prepare a government that is going to be accountable, well-equipped to deliver every aspect of what society needs. And so whether that is getting rid of corruption, which is rampant throughout our country, delivering, local government services, whether it's making sure the roads are working, water supply, electricity, all of those things start with having a government that understands their mandate. And that mandate has to be to serve the citizens. And so when we speak to citizens, our conversation is very different from others. It's about what is it we want to do together to build a new Zimbabwe. And we're already doing a lot of work on the ground to ensure that we are literally acting on what we are talking about with the communities, whether it's projects at a community level, working on developing young people, encouraging them in terms of skills training, creating entrepreneurial ventures, but also educating them on their rights as citizens, what the benefit and value of that vote is that they hold, and the power they have to change this country.
Sounds good. Along the same lines, I want to ask you what your thoughts are on Zimbabwe is a country that is facing several challenges, especially in the international community of nations. Sanctions are all over the place. There are questions about the democratic space. You've had to fight yourself for you to be even on the ballot. And there are several other issues that matter to the people of Zimbabwe, but are also relevant to the international community within Africa and beyond. So in terms of foreign policy, what do you bring in, and how do you see yourself navigating Zimbabwe out of the current economic situation, getting the sanctions lifted, getting the economic situation turned around, and for Zimbabwe to reclaim her place? Because I dare say that Zimbabwe, no African country has more intellectuals than Zimbabwe in the 80s and 90s. But today, it's a shame of a country. So how do you intend as president to navigate that? But before you get to that presidency, how do you inspire the hope of the millions of Zimbabweans to the extent that they will trust you, they will believe in you, so that they give you the mandate as the person that will deliver them from the current situation?
Sure. It's, for Zimbabwe, we have historically had a very inconsistent policy framework. We're a country which provides very little stability. I'm an entrepreneur. I have invested heavily in Zimbabwe, and I can tell you, as a business owner, you wake up tomorrow and you don't know what the rules are going to be. So I can certainly say to you, from an international engagement perspective, when you start thinking about the implications on what that means for our economy, I mean, you look at our currency, the fluctuations in our currency. It's a highly unstable environment to be investing in. Yet I've taken the risk. So I think what we need in Zimbabwe is to have a completely different government outlook in terms of the approach that we take. We need to be much more accountable in terms of the repercussions, the implications of the decisions that are being handed down by government. We need to take into consideration all of those that are affected and impacted by the decisions. But more broadly, from an international engagement perspective, you'll see less and less foreign investment, less and less willingness from a global community to engage in a country that is unpredictable, doesn't give you that clear understanding of what engagement means. I also happen to think that we need to think carefully about the approach we're taking in terms of the way we treat our own citizens. And again, looking at the fact that we are not putting citizens first, we're not prioritizing them, giving them the opportunities in our country, giving them a role to play in terms of leading this nation's economic development. It can't just be about a government that's deciding everything and is at the center of everything. So I think you'll see a very different leadership style with me as president. And I think Zimbabweans who are looking at our current government and looking at the leaders that we've had for decades in our country, will come to realize that if you look at just demographically, statistically, a lot of citizens in Zimbabwe are not even opting to vote. They choose not to even engage because they don't see the potential for a stable and very different, leadership within government. So I do believe that as a political party, we do bring that. We've demonstrated our ability to engage with citizens. We do have leadership structures throughout the country. We are a government in waiting in earnest. Because of the electoral environment, we were not able to get as many candidates on the ballot, but we are in 60 out of 210 constituencies contesting on the ballot this year in this election. So we've done well for a small, young political party. And I think a lot of citizens are just sitting back and watching and waiting to see what will happen. What, will this be possible? I guess my big sort of call to action for Zimbabweans is we need to make sure we make a change now. We cannot wait 5 more years and continue to watch Zimbabwe go through further exploitation, because that's what's happening currently. We cannot afford to continue to watch Zimbabwe be put on that list of countries that are not, not friendly to the rest of the world, but to its own people. I would never want to call for any country to bring sanctions upon Zimbabwe. I think, all of this has been very unfortunate. Certainly you have to look at, what were the reasons, but I would never be someone who calls for anything that would harm our nation or bring any sort of adverse, sort of advancement to our country. So I would simply say my main goal, my focus is to build a very sound government. You speak of the intellectuals we have around the world. We want them back in Zimbabwe, building Zimbabwe. I will rely heavily on the brain trust that we have throughout the world, but also in Zimbabwe, to ensure that the decisions we are making are actually inclusive, that we're engaging people in the decisions we're making. So I'm not coming to this government, with an agenda that is mine on my own. And I'm going to be ensuring that at every phase of what we are doing, we're taking into consideration what has been done and looking at how best to improve. We have institutions throughout this country that need to be reviewed. We need to look at how to strengthen them, how to ensure that they can function independently without politicization, without politicizing them, and to make sure that really all aspects of the civil service are also able to, to function effectively.
Talking about as a follow-up question, I have 2 of them on that point that you made. One is you talked about being, having candidates or aspirants in 60 of the 210 constituencies. That doesn't look good for you if you become president, because it means you will have a minority space in parliament. How does that look
Yes.
for you?
Well,
and how would you then, get the right balance for you to be able to govern? Because politics is about numbers, isn't it?
Yeah. We are at a disadvantage already, given that we had intended to have a majority in government, and we have cases in the courts right now fighting to get additional MP candidates on the ballot. So yes, it does create an environment where it would be quite challenging to lead as president. However, we are not a political party that believes that it's our way and no other way. So what I would hope is that we would have a very united government, a government who can refocus and look at how best to lead this nation effectively. And that includes making sure that we have a politically plural Zimbabwe, where everyone can sit at the table, come with ideas, come with solutions, not fight each other, not attack each other, but work on really building our nation together in a responsible way. So I will work through that process, and I will tell you that already there are quite a number of smaller political parties, but also independent parties. Independent candidates that are reaching out to us. We are having conversations, but I'm very keen to make sure that whatever the government is that comes forward, it's an inclusive government, it represents all citizens, and that it is a government that has an understanding of its mandate. The parliamentarians are to serve the citizens, to listen to the citizens, and to make sure that they are representing our people on the ground. Our councillors should actually be doing work on the ground to develop their communities or their wards. So this is going to be a very different type of leadership that I bring to Zimbabwe.
In other words, what I hear from you is that you will be willing to form a coalition government if that would be the case, that you're elected president, and you can put in your comment on that. But I want to ask you, so that you respond to that together, how do you get Zimbabwe out of the international sanctions that Zimbabwe is currently facing? How do you get the country out of that?
We have to re-engage, and we have to demonstrate that we have the ability to do the right thing. I think that's what it really comes down to. And so there's diplomacy that's needed. We've got to work through that process. As a presidential candidate, I've not been naive to the fact that you do need to already be engaging, with the diplomatic community, with the global community. And so we as a presidential candidate, but also as a political party, we are paving the way. We're very protective about making sure that Zimbabwe remains for Zimbabweans. But at the same time—
Are you already engaged with the diplomatic community in Zimbabwe? Is that what you're saying?
I'm working very hard on that. Maybe not across the board, but we are working to make sure that every embassy that is in Zimbabwe, whether it represents, SADC or, anywhere within Africa, but also globally, that, the embassies know about us. And I've been working actively to make myself available for, engagement, with the diplomatic space. So it's necessary. They should know us as a political party. And I think unless we do that, even when I do become president, it'll be very difficult for us to build bridges and to be able to take Zimbabwe forward.
Let me get to the specifics. What is the campaign environment like for you as a woman candidate, running against, a male-dominated space? What is it like for you? Because this is important, and in developing African democracy, there are challenges. Women always start from a disadvantaged position. So what is it like for you? And again, you've lost a lot of time because of unfair requirements. You have a month to catch up. So how is it for you to navigate the campaign environment, and how do you intend to deal with the shortcomings that come as a result of your gender running in a country like Zimbabwe?
Well, fortunately, we have been very active on the ground even before this election. We have been engaging with citizens. We are well organized in terms of the party structures. We have leadership throughout the country. And so they're paving the way for what the campaign is doing. I have not been able to get out on the ground and be able to say I am a presidential candidate until today, but I certainly now can really raise the bar in terms of visibility for our party, and I intend to be with the citizens for the next 30-something days until the 23rd of August. it's difficult as a woman, because at first, some people are hesitant. They don't really understand this notion of a woman being able to lead an entire nation, let alone a woman leading an organization. Oftentimes, culturally, we are very disadvantaged as women in Africa. And in Zimbabwe, we still do have men who believe that a woman will never be able to lead our nation. So let's be real. It's not going to be an easy process. And I can tell you that a lot of Zimbabweans, women, don't have the confidence to stand. If you look at the ballot right now, we have a very small number of women. We're supposed to have 50-50 representation in government. It's not going to be possible this year. We don't even have the candidates on the ballot. But in addition to that, you think about the fact that this year Zimbabwe imposed a nomination fee of $1,000 on a member of parliament, anyone who's wanting to run for the House of Assembly. $1,000 is a lot of money for the average person in Zimbabwe. Most will never have that money and cannot afford the fees. So we did very well to be able to get candidates on the ballot this year. And then as a presidential candidate, I was expected to pay $20,000 just for the chance to be on the ballot. So that already creates a huge disadvantage. It's just one more thing that prevents women from participating. So as a candidate, but also as a president, when I am president of Zimbabwe, I will work very hard to ensure that women are equally, are included in decision-making in our country, and that we actively work to make sure more women can participate in politics in this country.
Let's talk about a bit more about that in terms of your vision to ensure inclusivity for the Zimbabwean people in the political space, like you say. And just out of curiosity, I might want to ask, how many of the candidates that you have in the parliamentary race are women? From your party, and how you then intend to bridge the gap, so that, I mean, women are very, I call it woman-centric. You want to have so many of you around yourself. So how does Elisabeth then envision, a government that gives women the chance to be part of the governance structure that she has?
Yeah, look, I want to be clear. I want people to view me as a presidential candidate. I happen to be the only woman on the ballot, but I want people to see beyond my femininity, the fact that I'm a woman. I'm proud to be a woman. I embrace all aspects of being a woman, but at the same time, I really also want Zimbabweans to hold me accountable and to really analyze all that I am bringing to the table as a candidate, beyond the fact that I'm a woman. But when we look at the women in Zimbabwe, most of the time we're not given that equal vantage in terms of being taken seriously and being said, look, this person is coming to the table with something that they will deliver to the party, to the political process, whatever the role is that they're wanting to pursue. Oftentimes, the women that have been given opportunities, it's through proportional representation. It's not really been merited, and that's really unfortunate, because we have very capable women in our country. So we as a political party have worked really hard to be inclusive of women, of people with disabilities, of young people as well. You'll see on our leadership, we have young people who are in very senior leadership positions, because we believe in being inclusive. As a political party, we now have, out of the 31 MP members of parliament candidates, we have 9 women. We have, out of 100 plus, ward representatives, or what we call councillors, we have a total of 30. We wanted to have so many more, and we actively worked on trying to make sure we had the numbers. I think we currently represent just over 10% of the total number of women that are on the ballot in terms of the members of parliament in this electoral race. So we've done well in terms of delivering the women to the table, but we need to do so much more, and every political party in Zimbabwe needs to do so much more. We're working actively to continue to strengthen our women's league or our women's affairs group to make sure that they have active programs, vibrant leadership, and that they are able to, to carry forward their own mandate in terms of trying to encourage women. But we've got a lot of work to do to educate women on, the role of someone in politics. What does that mean? Women have to give up a lot when they commit to politics. It means less time with the family, less time with your children. Maybe you're not going to be there all the time to cook dinner for your husband. And so that comes with all sorts of challenges. At the time that you're investing away from your own business. Some of our women have small businesses, and now they can't do the work that they're doing because they're committing to politics. So we have to capacitate, to provide resources for women. We need to, ensure that all the civic groups that are out there that are wanting to engage women are actually delivering, viable, tangible solutions to some of the problems that women are facing. It's not just about training them, it's about actually equipping them, enabling them to do the work. Women right now contesting this election are worried about, how am I actually going to get from where I live to, canvass this entire constituency? I don't have a car, I don't have the money for transport. So these are all issues we're facing in this political space, and it's challenging. It's really, really challenging. Now scale that up to an entire political party. We're working really hard to make sure that we are able to equip and capacitate, but we need everyone to help in that process.
Well, sounds like a handful, but and we wish you all the best with the party.
Thank you.
I know I will get into this because you are running for office and the job is a handful. Being president of Zimbabwe, international sanctions are all over the place. The economy is in shambles. Mm-hmm. I might want to get the specifics of what really it is that you have as a vision of getting Zimbabwe out of the present situation. And I'm going to give you another chance to just get into the specifics of how, when you're elected president, day one, you get into office, how do you deal with the myriad of problems or challenges that Zimbabweans face from the economy, especially from the economy, stabilizing, the country in terms of foreign policy and international relations within Africa and beyond, and, getting Zimbabweans to finally say they are proud to be Zimbabweans. Corruption is massive. And there's a question I'm going to ask you at the end of this interview. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but just give me an idea. Day one, what does Elisabeth's presidency look like in terms of the urgent priorities that the country has to deal with? And what are those priorities from where you sit?
I always avoid the day one or the first 100 days questions because it's difficult to say at this point. And I am working very hard on that. And I don't want to, create this false notion that I have the answers to everything. I don't know what day one is going to look like for me as president of Zimbabwe. Every day in Zimbabwe changes. The challenges we're facing change constantly. But what I will say is that I will ensure that I have a very solid team sitting around the table on day one of this, presidency. And I will ensure that that team is well equipped to start addressing every aspect of the problems we are facing in our country, of the challenges that are ahead for us as a country. And so that team is really who I will ensure is executing the work that I will do on day one. And they will be representative of whether it's the industrial crisis that we have, our economy. I'm not going to profess to be a jack of all trades, and have expertise in everything. I will bring the best minds together to lead this nation, to sit, by my side, advising me on, the direction that we should take. And they will rely heavily on the citizens as well in terms of the direction that they take. So I don't know what day one will look like, but I will not be resting that day because as I have not rested for the last 25 months or so on this election, every single day we are thinking about how to solve the problems of this country.
Well, that's quite a handful, and I mean, I like how you've navigated the question. I would want to push you a little bit more, but
I can speak to, look, there are things we're doing already. When you talk about specifics, so for example, I know that I recognize that there's a huge need to really look at the skills training within our country. You spoke of the intellectual capacity we have as a country, but slowly we are losing, for the younger generation, a lot of them do not have relevant skills anymore. So we need to start looking at the industrial sector, thinking about what sort of industrial spaces we want to revive. I've got an incubation space already that we are developing. We're building 30 companies now, not when I'm in office, not when I'm in government. We are shaping and developing 30 companies. These will create jobs. These are going to, encompass all sorts of industrial, sectors. And we are also currently working on a program that will ensure skills training for young people. We want to make sure that we, re-engage with the diaspora and bring them back. So we've got networks throughout the country, throughout the world, with our own diaspora, Zimbabwean citizens living in diaspora, who, are looking keenly at this election, saying, I would love to play a role in helping to shape the future of Zimbabwe. So whether it's the health sector, the mining sector, whatever space we are looking to solve the problems of, we're going to have to figure out how to bring our educated citizens back home, our teachers, our nurses, our doctors. I also, as a president, being someone from, a science, technology, innovation, and, a mathematics background, I want to see a future in Zimbabwe where we are focusing on innovation. So education is going to be extremely important, making sure that we are investing in research and development. Our academic institutions, are they focusing on the right skills, the right academic disciplines? So there's a lot that we talk about in our manifesto, and these are tangible, specific deliverables that we will bring to Zimbabwe. So it's not just waiting to see what we'll do. We know what we will do, and we have that mandate already from the citizens. Our manifesto has been written with the input of the citizens of Zimbabwe.
Well, we are almost done 1 hour already, and we've got to bring this home. But let me just now get into what you see, and this is a curious question. I already asked you about it, the possibility of forming a coalition government, because you will most definitely end up with a minority in parliament. So you have to bring in a coalition of parties or individuals, as it were. Would you have any terms and conditions for the people that you work with? And what would that be like in terms of what would you be looking for in the kind of individuals that you bring on board to serve in your government? Because as a political party, you will be at a disadvantage. And would you be open to strictly political party affiliation, or are you going to look at individuals for what they bring?
I can't really say just yet, because the way we've always viewed the future of Zimbabwe's government is with the lens of our own ideology. As UZA, we have our own values, our own specific ideology, and our own goals in terms of what we want to deliver for Zimbabwe. So when I think about people bring up the coalition or government of national unity all the time, we are talking to other political players. We're already having conversations. We are not a party that is, functioning in an island and saying we are the only, and, we know and understand that we're going to have to work with others in government. So I think the discussions we have will help us to understand, what our own expectations would be. But I would say that the challenge I see is always when different people try to bring different ideologies together and don't really agree in terms of what they want to deliver to the country or to, in their government or in their political space. So the biggest challenge for me is trying to figure out how to get us to all go in the same direction. And that will require us understanding that we need to be aligned ideologically. We need to ensure that the government we are envisioning together really does make sense for the people of Zimbabwe and can actually provide a future that that the Zimbabwean citizens are expecting. So I really, until we sit at the table and have those conversations, and we are open to talking to other political players. We're not, we want a politically plural Zimbabwe, many minds, different ideas, different backgrounds, but at the end of the day, we have to deliver a mandate, a manifesto for Zimbabwean people. And so it's about us having the same outlook at the end of the day. And I would say, like, again, the simple things, like, are people willing to finally give up corruption in Zimbabwe? This has been a very widespread, normal problem for most people. They don't even think twice anymore about the corruption in our country. They're part of it. Well, are we willing to give that up and make sure that we no longer participate? I mean, we have, as a political party, zero tolerance for corruption. We've had to face it in our own party, and we address it there and there. So, when you think about working with others in government, in politics, are they willing to do the right thing? That's what it comes down to for me.
I mean, you talk about corruption, and I'm seated here and I'm asking myself, how do you deal with corruption? What is your script for anti-corruption effort? Because it's massive, and I'm forced to make reference to a story that has recently caused a storm that was done by, Al Jazeera. I'm sure you know about the Gold Mafia series, and you ask yourself, what is the script? How do you deal with it?
Well, how you deal with it? Just a plain example. The Al Jazeera documentary series brought out a number of issues, and I'm not hearing government really addressing any of it. So how do you deal with it? You address the issues. As government, that's what I would expect my government to do. And so I would say, we as Zimbabweans, the script we have is already written. It's our party, it's our country's constitution. Our constitution has an answer for corruption, and that is in the form of an institution called the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission. So let's start there.
But Elisabeth, it's not working. It's not being applied.
Yes. So let's find out why it's not working. Let's make sure that we get to the root cause of what is causing it to not work. We need to make sure these institutions can function independently, that they are not tampered with, that they are not politicized, and that they are truly, truly representing the citizens of Zimbabwe. So let's find out what's going wrong there and let's address it. Rather than trying to create redundant systems, let's make sure that we have a true anti-corruption commission. That's what it comes down to. Like I said, I think the script is there, the answers are there, but we're not upholding our constitution. We're not following our own policies, our own laws. So until that's done, we're not going to progress.
Does yesterday's judgment give you a feeling of comfort with independence of the judiciary, and do you believe that then that is a marker for how independently a judiciary works?
I've heard many reports that there has been a compromised judiciary in Zimbabwe. There have been instances and cases of, issues reported. My case was not that at all. I believe that, I went through a delayed judgment, which caused and affected a lot of disadvantage for me. But in essence, if I think about the deliberations and all that took place, I was treated fairly. The judgment, the ruling was fair. I think anyone that sat in that courtroom would say, I should have been on the ballot on the 21st of June, and the court acknowledged that. So I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful that there are still the possibilities of us being able to use our judicial system, for our own protection. I think that there is work to be done to ensure the separation of powers in Zimbabwe, and our constitution, our party manifesto actually addresses that in great detail. We want to make sure that there is no compromise in the judicial system. It's a place that should represent the rights of every citizen. It doesn't matter who the citizen is, and there should be no one that is above the law in our country.
Notwithstanding the decision that you got yesterday from the judiciary, do you still have concerns about how the judiciary is run in the country, and would you be, as president, making certain, recommendations or, proposals in terms of how the principle of separation of powers would be best implemented in Zimbabwe?
We have a very clear outline in our manifesto about how we will address and what we will do, to ensure a separation of powers and that the judicial system is completely independent. But I can't really comment much on the judicial system. This was my very first time in court. I'll be honest, I've never had to,
wow.
I've had lawyers, I'm a business person, so we've had, but it was my first encounter with the law in terms of having to go to a justice system and say, this is my case, I plead my case. And I do feel that I was treated fairly. I think that there's I said it yesterday, I think that there's a certain ethical requirement that, those who are in positions of leadership or oversight need to continue to uphold. And I think maybe there are some individuals who are compromised, have lost sight of their own responsibilities and the role that they should be playing for our country. But overall, I would hope that everyone wants to know and believe that our judicial system is fair. And I hear different stories. I'm not able to judge personally.
Let me ask you, do you have confidence in the Electoral Commission?
I have confidence in the citizens of Zimbabwe. I can't say, it really has not been a good experience with the Electoral Commission from day one. I mean, I have, we have had so many of our candidates rejected over the most unacceptable reasons. Individuals that have sacrificed, worked so hard to get to the finish line, and then were just told, no, you can't participate in this election. And it's been overwhelming, the number. More than half of our candidates were rejected. And some of them, have been chosen by their own communities. They, the people are relying on the opportunity to have chosen their own leaders. So I don't have a lot of faith in the fairness of our electoral system in Zimbabwe. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I appeal to them here and now and all the time to do the right thing. They have a responsibility to delivering a free and fair election. It's not fair yet. It's not been fair for us as a political party in opposition. So I have confidence in the people of Zimbabwe to use the mandate, to use the vote that they have, to use the right they have, that people fought and struggled for and died for, to use that vote to choose the government that they want. I hope that they will choose me as president of Zimbabwe. And if they don't, they've still made the decision to choose what they want. So ultimately, I have faith in the people of Zimbabwe.
Back in Kenya, where I come from, we have a popular notion that goes that it is not the voters that count. It is the people who count the votes that at the end of the day, they don't determine the outcome, but the announcement that they make becomes the ultimate. But beyond that, in the event that you feel that the outcome is not fair in terms of what the Electoral Commission declares, what options do you have, and how would you want the country to react to that eventuality?
My biggest worry is to keep our citizens safe. I don't want to see anyone harmed during this election. So my hope is that if the results don't go the way people want, is that we use the platforms we have, the judicial system. We work through the process as we have always done to try to solve our problems, but not putting the citizens in harm's way. I know that This election is being watched closely by the international community, but also, as political parties, we are all trying to figure out how to have our own people at the ballots counting the votes, because we always say you have to defend your own votes as well. You have to be in there when they're counting them and make sure that those votes are not being compromised. It's a big, huge undertaking. We have 10,000 plus polling stations in our country. How I'm going to get 2 or 3 people to every polling station is mind-boggling. But I am hoping that we will have citizens that will step up, that will volunteer to be there on behalf of our party, that will count those votes for us and verify that those numbers are real, so that we don't have, to have that fight at the end to prove that we've won. So it's a very long and difficult process, but we're working through that and hoping we can protect our votes.
Elisabeth, how do you relate with the other political parties, with the other contestants or candidates in the presidential race? And is there a possibility that you could work with them, especially those that are not in the ruling party, to ensure that you have an outcome that favors, quote unquote, the opposition, a united opposition, like has been the case in other countries, where all political players who are not affiliated to the ruling party then come together to fight a common enemy, that is the incumbent?
I'm always willing and open to speak. I've spoken with some of the other presidential candidates, but not the 2 main, so-called main political parties. I think in terms of the opposition, we have a challenge because some of the opposition leaders who are more established have been in government for a number of years. So I think there's a little bit of an element of, overconfidence that they will win just naturally because they are opposition and Zimbabwe is ready for change. We believe Zimbabwe is ready for change this year. So I think that it is important for opposition leaders to talk and think about how best to progress. But at the end of the day, it is necessary for us to also be realistic about, what happens when people come together and try to force a coalition or a joining together of forces. We don't want to end up with a situation where we have multiple splintered views and a very divided government. So these are all decisions we're having to work through and we're talking about and trying to figure out right now.